This week in 2001, the 76ers reached the pinnacle of their NBA Finals season. After beating the Vancouver Grizzlies by a score of 107-91, the Sixers sat with a 41-14 record and were on a 6-game winning streak. The Sixers would go 15-12 over the course of the rest of their season and would ultimately lose to the eventual NBA champion Los Angeles Lakers in the finals.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, Josh Abrams. Today we're going to talk about the Flyers as their season chugs along to the end point there, and then we're going to get into the Sixers as they come back from the All-Star break. But first, here to join me to talk some Flyers today is Tyler Small and Siobhan Nolan. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. The Flyers are trending upward still. We're feeling very good about them. In the last week that the Flyers have had games, they have gone 2-1 in those games. And I think really the most important, or really, I guess impressive is a better word to use, is the opponents that they're winning these games against. Not just close games like that 5-3 game at Tampa, and even then Tampa was up big on us early. But the teams like Columbus and Florida, or I'm trying to like maybe even the Hurricanes or the Blue Jackets, like those kinds of teams. The fact that we've been winning so big against teams like those, that has to make you guys feel good for the playoffs because of the quality of those opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to kind of highlight the Columbus Blue Jackets win because I thought that was huge. That was basically at home a playoff atmosphere, I'd say. It was basically playoff implications because that bumped them up to the 3 spot. And I know how tough the Metropolitan is right now. 1 through 6 is only separated by 8 points, which is just unreal to see at this late in the season. But yeah, I mean, it really just showed how hungry these guys are. I mean, Konechny, I think, is, if they do make the playoff, Konechny is going to be that leading force. I mean, the only time he was in it was when he was 20 years old back in 2017, and he had 1 goal throughout 6 games. And if you see like a playoff implication game like this, I wouldn't be surprised to see another 3-point performance from when we start playing in April. So that was just a lot of young guys getting kind of acclimated to what a playoff atmosphere is like, and I thought it was a huge victory.
It's also great because last season we had the series sweep by the Blue Jackets. We did not win any games that we played against them last season, and now tonight we could have our own series sweep against them. So I think looking at that from last season to this season, it's great. You know, we have, I think, a 76% chance of making it to the playoffs now, and even though we're only 1 point ahead of, the Islanders, I think the Blue Jackets, all those guys, I think that we still can stay in that 3 spot and still get that playoff spot. Plus,
I'm glad you brought that up because you really want to get a playoff atmosphere kind of vibe playing the same team 2 nights in a row, even though at the beginning of the season I thought it was stupid that they kind of put some back-to-backs together for the Flyers. But that really shows you get a huge win at home, dominant win by 4 goals, and you got to go right to their home ice and prove it to them right then and there to close out a series perhaps.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys alluded to the standings because – and I'm glad you also alluded to 1 through 6 being only separated by 8 points. The possibility for us to, I mean, we could, theoretically speaking, it's ambitious and it's optimistic, but there is a very good chance that we could win the division. Now, at that point, we're talking about sequencing. And at this, I think that's really what it's all about right now when you get this late into the season is sequencing for the Flyers. For a team like Pittsburgh or Washington, they don't need to worry about that. All they need to worry about is winning games, taking care of their own business. The Flyers have to take care of business and then also hope for
get a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
No, and you're 100% right because the one thing that you always fear with this Philadelphia team is they're also a bad week and a half away from being a spot above just the Rangers and Devils. Like it just depends with how streaky the past Flyers teams have been, but I think this team's different. I think this team has stayed consistently hungry, especially at home. I think this team has been able to circulate around specific guys. I mean, we're going to talk about Giroux kind of heating up in a little bit. Couturier is now leading the team in points while Konechny is still getting it done with the goal side of it. But just you see the vets and you see these young guys stepping up. It's really been huge, and I don't think that you'll have that inconsistency with the Flyers just in general.
Because we struck a balance. I know we keep
Yeah.
talking about that whole veteran, young guy dynamic, but it really has given us an advantage because the other teams in the Metro Division, sure, they have their young guys and they have their vets, but I don't think anyone's been able to have them work so well together like we have. And I think that it's really promising to have that, you know, bond between them because the young guys are learning and they're going to be able to step up when the vets retire. And it's just making sure that the team is in good hands now and it's going to stay in good hands for the years to come.
I think what's really promising when you bring up the young guys and the veteran discrepancy is the fact that the Flyers, I know it was like this coming into Tuesday's game against Columbus, but coming into that game, they were one of 4 teams in the league to have 9 or more players score 10 or more goals, or 10 or 9, whatever the numbers were. The Flyers are in elite company right now solely because of their balance. And I mean, I'd like to think that, I think that factor, that quality of having a balanced scoring attack. I mean, you guys didn't even mention Kevin Hayes, and we've talked about him every week.
Past couple of weeks, exactly.
You know, and one of the guys on that list was Oscar Lindblom, and as much as we miss him, it still goes to show how potent our offense is.
Yeah, no, it's really been great. And then to kind of go on the other side of your point, having Carter Hart back at the same time has also been a huge relying force. Now he's 3-1 since coming back with a save percentage of .934 in those 4 games. I mean, it's been huge, over 100 saves already. He hasn't skipped a beat after Brian Elliott really held it down. So having your defensive back alongside while losing one offensive weapon but having such an abundance around him has really been huge for the Flyers.
Yeah, because we've been hit by those devastating injuries, Lindblom, Nolan Patrick, you know, and you never know what's going to happen in the future, but I don't think we're as worried about that anymore as we could be because we trust the guys that we have now. I think that there's a lot of trustworthy guys in Lehigh that you could even call, so I don't think that we're as nervous to kind of take some hits. I think that we're really starting to trust in our team and trust that, you know, we can overcome any obstacles that might come our way.
Yeah, and to go off that Lehigh point you brought up, I'm going to butcher his name, but Albie Cabell.
Albie
Cabell,
yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Just coming back. Last season, he only had 9 games for the Flyers and averaged 5 minutes, and he had a -1 plus minus. Now he comes here, he's doubled that. He has 11 minutes per game in 27 appearances, and he has a 3 plus minus. So, like, that's a huge fourth-line guy. Like, he's not going to get a lot of credit. He had an assist in that Blue Jackets game, but that is huge for the Flyers to have a little bit of depth there. They could go plug someone in from Lehigh and get immediate results.
Exactly, because you bring someone up from Lehigh, you don't know, you know, another team's not going to be like, oh, look out for this 20-year-old kid, but then that 20-year-old kid comes and puts up a couple points against them, and it's like, that's great that we can have those guys just come straight out the gate and perform.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, so looking at the schedule and the standings, there's only so much hockey left to play, but there's still a lot of implications left on the board. The home and away discrepancy for just any of the Philly sports teams, really.
Anyone playing in Wells Fargo.
Yeah, is just amazing. And I mean, you know, our producer Tyler Pittis showed me this stat. The stat in orange there is just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that they're somewhat formidable or can play decent hockey on the road. Does that stat or that just story, that narrative concern you for the playoffs?
But that's the problem. You don't want to play just decent hockey on the road. You want to be excellent wherever you go, you know. And obviously the Wells Fargo Center, as any stadium is in Philly, it's a fortress, you know. It is kind of intimidating for other teams to go there. But I would really love for the Flyers to be a team that you're just kind of afraid to play them wherever they go. You know, you want to be able to have them play reliable, really excellent hockey, whether it be home or away.
Yeah, and we kind of made the joke about Wells Fargo, and we're going to talk about this in about 10 minutes when we get to the Sixers. But, like, you look at the two different transparencies. Like, the Flyers have a legitimate chance of taking this division, and then it wouldn't be as big of a problem. You'd only see the being the away team in a series kind of later in the playoffs. For the Sixers, for example, they're going to be seeing that throughout the entire playoffs if they stay exactly where they are. So I think it's not as big of a problem for the Flyers. No. I think that I give them a lot better of a chance to win a game, at least one game on the road, to flip home ice back to you if you're a lower seed and stick in the wild card. But I don't know if I see that for the other guys in blue.
And I hate to compare the two teams, even though they play in the same stadium, in the same city, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the biggest difference between the two of them is the coaching. I mean, Alain Vigneault has been to 2 Stanley Cups. He hasn't Unfortunately, he hasn't won
Yeah.
any Stanley Cups. But I think just the fact that he's gotten that far, I mean, we haven't seen Brett Brown get that far yet.
No.
Alain Vigneault has been around much longer. He's established himself in the league. Just having him behind the players on the bench give you confidence in a deep run? Because I know for me, I don't want to go out on a limb and just say, oh, Alain Vigneault is the reason why we're going to make a run. But I feel like that's the last, that's kind of the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah, you can even see it like comparing him against Brett Brown, comparing him against Flyers coaches of the past. I mean, you really look at Farabee is not a fluke. I mean, he's a skilled player who got called up at the right time, and then he gets put in the right system by his coach. I mean, all these younger guys coming to fruition. I mean, Konechny having the banner year that he has, even you could compare him to. But at the same time, building around Giroux the way he has, building around the way that Voracek they has, realizing that they're not the same players anymore, but that they still have a lot to offer and a lot to play. I mean, just some of the game plans he designed, like getting them to spread the puck around. I mean, saying right now, if you were to tell me last season that Giroux would have 8 points in the last 5 games throughout the second half of the year, I would not believe it for a second. Mm-hmm. But that just comes down to the coaching and the system that you put him around, because he's an aged veteran now. You should utilize him in that way.
And I think he's improved the attitude of the team dramatically. They're so much more of a family now, and they can play together so well. And I think with Flyers coaches of the past, you haven't seen that. There's been such a disconnect between it's kind of the players and then the manager, and just the coaching and the playing are two very different worlds. But now it's all coming together very seamlessly. And I think that if we keep Alain Vigneault, and I think that we should, that's only going to get better, because, you know, when we talked about the balance between the vets and the young guys before, I think that's just a part of the fact that there's really a togetherness now. And I think that that's a really underrated but important improvement in the coaching.
All right. Well, before we go to commercial break, we have a big opportunity if we keep this up and make the playoffs to play Pittsburgh in the first round. Now, the last time we played, there's some history in the last decade playing Pittsburgh in the first round. With this year playing out the way it has, do you feel confident that we can win a 7-game series against the Penguins?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is a differently coached team. This is a differently run team. And at the same time, you, again, don't fear those inconsistencies. I mean, if you're a fan of the Flyers, you're excited for it. If you're a fan of hockey, you're excited for that series. So this should be a lot of fun. But I think just how loud and intense it'll be, it might be a little much. That's where your veterans come in to play in Pittsburgh in that environment. Sure. Yeah. But I do have confidence in the Flyers. I
have confidence in them too. I don't want to say that the Penguins are overhyped or anything because they're first in the division, but I think that, you know,
it's not the same team.
It's not the same team, and I think that we do have a good chance of blowing past them.
Yeah, every year changes, and it seems like this year's going really well for the Flyers. You got to feel good about them. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're going to talk some Sixers, so stay tuned. All right.
Exposure to blue light can mess with your sleep and memory cycle, so make sure you limit your screen time at least 2 hours before you go to bed.
Kylie loves to an egg.
An egg?
An egg.
How does a Jenner lose to an egg?
On the internet to an egg.
You know, there is a show for that. It's called Backstage Pass.
See the new library point?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, doing stuff in the library. Oh.
In the library?
Yeah.
New library.
You know, there is a show for that called LTV News, where the action never stops.
I wonder how the basketball team.
You know, there is a show for that called SportsTalk.
So are you a Carson Wentz or Nick Foles guy?
More of a Nate Sudfeld.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Wonder where we can hear about Philly sports.
You know, there's a show for that called Sports Talk Philadelphia.
You like Family Feud?
Yeah.
You like all shows like that?
Yeah.
I wonder if LaSalle has a show like that. That'd be kind of cool.
There is a show for that called Q&A.
I really wish that we could just display our talents.
Yeah, me too.
There's a show for that called Explorers Got Talent.
All this and more on LaSalle TV.
Welcome back to Sports Talk Philly here on LaSalle TV. Siobhan steps off for Jim Wister, who comes on to talk Sixers with us. Thank you for joining us, Jim. Let's get right into it. It's been a little bit of a while since we had a Sixers game. All-Star break was just this past weekend. In the midst of that, before that happened, the Sixers had a 3-game homestand, and we know at this point how well they play at home.
Pretty good.
So I guess it's not really that much of a surprise that when the Clippers come into town, and I think the Clippers are the best team in the league, we beat them by 7. It could have been a bigger deficit at the end, but I think the fact that they're able to take care of business against a very deep team like that at home, it doesn't solve all the problems, but winning does solve everything. So I want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost with that long of a break, you kind of over-mentalize some of these things. And when I was looking back at the stats for the show, I kind of forgot they went on a 3-game winning streak. I mean, their losses beforehand against Miami, against Boston, for example, those were just such ugly losses. And again, of course, because they were on the road. So you got to take it with a grain of salt at home because you need to step it up on the road. But just mixed emotions in this All-Star break, I guess, diving a lot more into things than you should have.
Yeah, that 3-game home game winning streak kind of made me feel good, but they need to win road games at some point. This stretch run going into the playoffs, in the playoffs, you're gonna need to win road games at some point, and they just need to prove during the stretch that they can at least do it against good teams.
All right. Well, looking at the All-Star, just to recap All-Star weekend real quick. Ben and Joel went to Chicago. They represented Philadelphia, and they each played just under 30 minutes, which I think it's fair, reasonable, decent, given how how crowded it gets on the bench, how much time they play on the floor together. You saw that they were separated a little bit in the All-Star weekend. Actually, since they were on different teams, they weren't playing together, but you didn't really see them on the floor a whole lot together. You saw a little instance there at All-Star weekend where, Embiid's on the floor, Simmons comes out and gives him a little tap. Do little things like that that don't happen at home or happen during a regular season game, does that kind of push away all the locker room problems that we've been talking about?
I think that's huge. And I usually hate, especially when sports talk shows talk about this kind of stuff, dive that deep into it. But I mean, I was a fan. I'm not even the biggest Sixers fan, but at the same time, I was looking at him playing with Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler before the game. They were playing soccer together. And I'm that's a huge red flag considering that Instagram post. But then you see the Ben Simmons thing, and it feels like reality TV. But I thought that was huge to show that once you're around other teams that you could start connecting with, that he still found the way to connect with his teammate, especially for the two that everyone on every show has been saying their styles clash. They can't play together. It's obviously showing they're not having success together. It still shows that they don't believe that, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of good to see. It's kind of like a bro moment almost. They're kind of just joking around, playing with each other, enjoy being around each other. And I feel like that's huge because, as you said, there's been a lot of talk about them not getting along, their play styles clashing, as obviously as you said. But I think that was a big moment for them.
Yeah,
sure.
So looking ahead, the Sixers they have to go on a road trip at some point. And I didn't include it in the graphic just because it's not coming up soon. But I mean, they still have tough road games. They got to go on the road Saturday, and I'm not gonna. I know we're at home on Monday, but I can't just forget about that Atlanta game.
No,
I mean,
you can't.
Atlanta's not good right now, but I'm adamant on Atlanta being the top team in the East within the next 3-4 years.
They're on their way.
I know we can debate about that later, but Atlanta's good. They got a young core talent. John Collins, Trae Young. What do you guys think about just the dynamic on the road, even against the crappy bottom of the league teams. Like, at this point, that has to be fixed, right?
Hopefully. I mean, we'll see. Because I kind of didn't dive too much into the Atlanta Hawks game. I think that 2 to 3 years they'll be a tough competitor, but right now they're still trying to figure themselves out. As long as you hold Trey in check and don't let him drop 40, which I believe he did on the Sixers. I'm looking more into Milwaukee on the road, obviously coming up soon. But then as soon as those couple of games are over, they're going to LA to play back-to-back Clippers and Lakers. Those 3 playoff games. They're like playoff games almost, but those 3 games, in my opinion, you have to play competitive, or I see the Sixers having zero chance in the playoffs, having zero chance of making it far in the playoffs.
So if they lose competitively, it doesn't necessarily have to be a one game.
Win because
it doesn't have to be a one possession game or like a.
As long as they just actually have a game where all 5 of their starting 5 show up. I mean, as long as they actually score in numbers, as long as Embiid and Simmons are able to play cohesively together, I think that's all you really have to see to still in your brain think of a realistic shot that the Sixers have a chance of going deep in the playoffs.
Yeah, that stretch out in LA that you alluded to, that's also like a 4-game stretch. We play Sacramento and Golden State as well. I believe that's probably the roughest part remaining on the Sixers schedule. That's like they're going to be out away from home for a couple games in a row, and they need to prove that they can, just like come together on the road and, like you said, everyone show up and do their part and actually win some games for us.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you mentioned those other 2 games, Jim, because of the whole idea of it being a trap game. Like that's definitely possible for a team like the Sixers. Before we move on to Fast 5, let's talk about the new additions. And I didn't really allude to it all that much for this show, but I think it's really huge because in the first game I saw Glenn Robinson play, he came right in and stroked a mid-range jumper. Now, of course, he's not going to do that consistently every play, but what is your guys' opinion so far in a small sample size of seeing Glenn Robinson and Alec Burks?
I'm big on Burks. I'm big on Robinson, obviously. I think that they're just huge just to open up this team and give Embiid and Simmons a chance inside. I mean, Burks is the only player on this team shooting over 40% from 3.
And he just got here.
So that's just an immediate improvement for one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in basketball, especially because I say it every single week, the NBA is run by 3-point shooting. So I think that both of them can stroke it from the outside. I think Burks is going to be huge down the stretch as a guy off the bench.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're going to improve the team. They're not really going to move the needle that much. They're not like separating us from being a good team to a great team just by picking up those 2 because they're nothing more than just role players who mostly come off the bench. But I mean, like, it's going to benefit the team. I would have loved to see them swing a bigger trade, maybe trade away someone like Tobias Harris or Josh Richardson and try to get someone like C.J. McCollum, get like a real pure shooter, scorer kind of guy. We were a little too conservative at the deadline. I want to see the big moves. That's what we need to do. Trying to win.
I think kind of opposite because I realized you could do a move like that. C.J. McCollum would have been a splash, obviously, but at the same time, I think this second half of the year, Richardson only averaging 15 a game, shooting a lower clip than he did in Miami, field goal percentage-wise and from 3. But I think in this second half, he's almost going to be like a trade piece. I think he's going to turn it on this half. I think he's going to be their most valuable player throughout the second half because he's a walking bucket. He really should be utilized more in this offense and shouldn't be a 4th to 5th best scoring option depending on the day Horford's having.
Well, thank you for saying Horford. I think the saving grace for for the rest of the season is him coming off the bench. I hate seeing $109 million come off the bench, but it has to happen. I mean, I know it was a one-game sample, but it was against what I think is the best team in the league.
Yeah.
Horford coming off the bench has to be at least beneficial. There's nothing bad about that.
Yeah, he clogs their offense. He really slows down the pace of the game because if for what it's worth, I think Simmons is top 3 fast break scorer in basketball. Yeah. And you just don't have those opportunities to get out and get him some of his. I think his assists would be up by probably 2 a game if he had that opportunity, and he had if he had 3 other athletic guys coming down the court with him, and then Embiid trailing behind for a rebound. So I think I'd like it for that kind of reasoning, but besides that, I think they're just money-wise, they're going to have him in the starting lineup come the playoffs.
I was never a big fan of the Al Horford signing from the beginning. I always thought he was an awkward fit with our team, and he's just like a slow-moving player. And like you said, Ben Simmons needs to get out and run, and he was just never a good fit, especially next to Joel Embiid trying to play the 4. He's not meant to be a 4. He's a center.
Right. I completely agree with that. That's going to do it for Sixers Talk. Let's move on to Fast 5. And Tyler, we're going to start with you. We're going to come on with some heat to start this. What are your thoughts on Rob Manfred's recent comments on the whole Astros situation?
You would like to see him get fired for it, but he's obviously not going to be going anywhere because he's just a scapegoat for the. he's been scapegoating this thing on Alex Cora, for example, who really isn't guilty, and others around him. Carlos Beltran apparently was, but I think him calling it a piece of metal, the World Series trophy, and not revoking it has been a huge failure for him. I think that he had to do 2 press conferences just to try and save his own butt.
Right.
So I think that he has horribly mismanaged this, and just a little second for the players. Carlos Correa, for example, and like Josh Reddick have been saying, we're going to come out and win. We're going to come out and shut you guys up for this. They don't get to run the narrative because we know they're good. They're such a talented team. They would have won without the cheating, but they don't get to decide when we stop talking about it.
True. Jim, who are your number 1 seeds for March Madness right now?
As of right now, I'm thinking Baylor's probably going to be 1, Gonzaga, San Diego State, and I'm going to go Maryland. The Big Ten is a really, really tough conference this year, and I feel like they're going to end up winning that conference championship.
You think that'll be enough to?
Yes, easily, because they're going to have like 10 teams in the tournament just out of that conference. So I think that'll be more than enough to put them to a top seed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting enough this year. If that happens, that'll kind of be the icing on the cake for how crazy it is. Tyler, Luis Severino went down. The injury train has already gotten going. Just briefly speak on that.
Spring training is back for the Yankees. It's baseball season when you realize Judge can't swing for another week or 2. Severino's being shut down. James Paxton had a surgery out of the blue. Just like we had 2 weeks to talk about how healthy and how deep the starting 5 is for the Yankees, and now 2 of their 5 pieces are gone. So give me Jordan Montgomery and then give me Michael King. That's a name for all the non-Yankee fans to remember. Michael King's going to be big this year.
Jim, are you all in? He's a Bucks fan, by the way. Are you all in on Jameis Winston coming back?
Yes, I am 100%. That eye surgery is going to be a game changer for him. He's actually going to be able to see where he's throwing the ball. I hope with all the money we have, we're going to upgrade the offensive line. Hopefully not give him too much money so he can sign a few more pieces. And I believe, honestly, he'll be in the conversation for MVP next year while leading the Buccaneers to the playoffs. All
right, Tyler, real quick. Sorry, we don't have enough time to react to that.
I want to talk about that.
Real quick, the NFL playoff format. I don't think anybody likes it. What are your thoughts on it?
NFL's doing it. MLB's doing it. Why stretch out the playoffs? It just irregulates the regular season, makes it pointless. I hate it.
All right, well, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to elaborate more on that. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of Sports Talk Philly. Make sure you go on to Twitter and find us at Sports Talk LTV. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SportsTalk Philadelphia. And also check us out on LaSalle TV Philly on YouTube, where you can find the other LaSalle TV episodes there. We hope you enjoy your weekend and tune in next week. See you soon.